Hi cuties! It's time to talk about all the books that I read in October, and I am proud to finally say that I am now caught up on my TBR. I have read all the books in the past couple months that I didn't get to in like August and September, finally have been accomplished in October's TBR. I read every book in October's TBR as well. Thank God. I was getting worried because I really felt like I was really stacking up books that I didn't get to in the previous months, and I don't like not finishing things. I like to check them off the lists, and so not being able to check them off in the journal was a source of anxiety and intrusive thoughts. I can say that I've done them. I cannot actually lift the pile of books that I read last month because it is over 10 pounds, and per my doctor's instructions since post-surgery, I am not allowed to lift that until the week of Thanksgiving, basically. So we gonna do these babies one by one of what I read in the order I read them, but first, some stats. I read a total of 15 books this month, and it was almost an even split between audio and physical reads, which was really surprising to me, but you know, recovery from a surgery kind of helped with that. Plus I had to do a lot of walking, so that it helped with a lot of the audiobooks. I read a total of 5,594 pages roughly, and I read 86 hours. I listened to 86 hours of audiobooks. Of the books in the genre divide, I read 7 fantasy, 2 thriller, 3 contemporary, and 1 sci-fi, 1 nonfiction, and 1 horror. On average, I rated the books about a 3.73 stars, so a pretty decent reading month. There were definitely some books that I absolutely loved, and other books that we'll talk about later. But the very first book that I read was technically an ebook, but not quite, because it's not totally formatted yet. I was alpha/beta reader for my dear friend Halah of Halo Moon Studios' new book, Tower of Dogs. So I read an early copy of this guy, and it will be released on January 11th, 2022. You can also pre-order your paperback copy of it now on Halah's Ko-fi page, and I will link that in the description. I've already purchased my copy because, yes, I did love this book so very much. I've known about the journey of Rome and Sparrow for a long time, pretty much since I've met Halah. We've been little writing buddies and stuff, but it's taken a long road to get it to the point where it's going to be published, and it's finally here. I'm so proud of her. I'm so happy that it's coming because I love how this story unfolds. I love the mystery of it. I love the grittiness of it, and it's told in dual POVs between Rome and Sparrow, who are brother and sister, and they end up leading very different lives due to trying to escape where they're currently living, because there are these kind of monster creatures called berserkers that keep attacking, and Rome seizes the chance to try to get them out, but only manages to get Sparrow out, and he is stuck behind. So we see their split POVs in their new experiences of what's going on. So Rome stays behind in the fourth, and Sparrow moves on into the main capital where things are happy and fine. Or are they? It's just really well constructed. There's so much world building to it. I can't wait to read the sequel already, and the first one's not even technically released yet, but I thoroughly enjoy this. I think Halah does a really great job with really destroying her characters. They go through some brutal stuff, and Halah's not one to shy away from it, which I really appreciate. She makes it very realistic in terms of like fighting and survival, and just the intricacy of the different kind of, not civilizations, but the classes that they're living in, kind of. She does a really good divide for that, and the positions that both Rome and Sparrow are put in, along with everybody else in the cast. Liam, my favorite. Love Liam so much. My poor boy. I really can't gush enough about this book because I think it has really good important messages, and it's also just a fantastic fantasy adventure. Definitely go check it out, and check out the Ko-fi link below. She also has a Patreon that you can subscribe to, and you can read early chapters of the book. She is slowly releasing chapters on her Patreon, so if you want to start reading it now, go check out her Patreon. So the next book that I finished was from my September TBR that I didn't get to, and that was Rebel by Marie Lu. And I was very excited about this because I did love the Legend trilogy, and this is now considered the 4th book, although it is set 10 years after Champion. And I thought Marie Lu did such a good realistic job about where these characters are, especially with how we left it in Champion. With, if you haven't read, I'll try not to spoil, but there is a very dramatic thing that happens to our boy Day that causes him to kind of lose a lot of the relationships that were built through that trilogy, but it was done in a very realistic sense in the fact that they were, you know, at war, and there were certain biological warfare, that's what I'm looking at, that was being used that affected him. And so now 10 years later, kind of seeing where these characters have all turned out and where they're kind of coming back together along with now their new situation in life. So this one is set in Antarctica, which if you read the Legend trilogy, you know that Antarctica is this big fancy tech god world where everything is based for your status, is based on the points you gain on being a good citizen or not. So it's a very tech savvy world. Daniel, Day's brother, Eden, who you met as a very young boy, is now a older teenager, and he likes to hang out with the lower class members of society, including one girl that you know that he has such a horrible crush on. And he likes to do drone racing, which is an illegal sport. And they get tied up in kind of this underground mafia situation, and Day now works for the kind of secret CIA agency of Antarctica. And so there's a bit of conflictingness because of who Day was as a rebel and now he's not. And so Eden's now kind of overtaking that role and wanting to really break out from his brother's shadow. And so we have the 2 POVs of Eden and Day throughout this whole one, and it's just really well constructed. I think it gets a lot of crap. I don't know why though, because it's Marie Lu and she did a really, really amazing job in writing this and in continuing the series, because I know a lot of people were upset with how Champion ended, despite how realistic it was. I'm really glad that she did write this one and that we got to see further into their lives and how their stories really conclude, but also begin. So I was really, really happy with this. There were some moments of it that I was a little lost in, but I still thoroughly enjoyed this. I'm glad that we have a really fun conclusion to the entire story of Legend and Friends. The next book was from my August TBR, I believe, and it was from a TBR from last year as well. So I'd really put this book off. I don't know why. It wasn't like putting it off, it was just other things got in the way. And so I never got the chance to pick it up because there was no audiobook for it, so it was a physical read. And it's a nonfiction, which are always daunting to me, but it is a kind of a memoir, and that is In Order to Live, a North Korean girl's journey to freedom by Youngmi Park. And Youngmi Park is actually also a YouTuber now, human rights activist for North Korean refugees, and this is her story of how she escaped North Korea and the aftermath of it. And the thing about this, I gave this 5 stars because it feels weird not to for someone's horrible suffering, but the strangest part about reading this book is I'm not surprised by the horrors of living in North Korea and some of the workarounds people do to try to survive in it. I was way more shocked at when she finally got out of North Korea and the atrocities that occurred to her and her mother, and likely her sister, though we don't get to see her sister's story at all in this, of human trafficking, of being raped, of just the world around them and how cruel it was, even outside of North Korea, which is supposed to be like the worst place in the world to ever live, right? And it just felt like, wow, she escaped to freedom to deal with this now. And I was more shocked and appalled at the way that China handles North Korean refugees. I'm quite disgusted by it. And I am so amazed at how she survived through all of this and now where she is today. It's just baffling. Like, the amount of cruelty and inhumanity that occurs even once you finally think you've reached freedom. It didn't stop. It didn't stop there, and it felt like it never did. Even when she got to South Korea, there was still this otherness about her, and I'm just like, how can people be so cruel knowing that she'd lived in a place no one wants to end up in? And yet it felt worse being outside of it. That's the thing that just like exploded my brain. So I highly encourage everyone to read this. It is such an honest story. Obviously, it wasn't like embellished or anything. These are just the facts of what happened to her and her mother. I do wish, because her sister got out in a different way, she took a different route. So I'm curious to know what her sister went through, but that's her own story if she ever wants to tell it. I just want to know how other people managed to get out on a different method than how Young Mi got out. So I do have a few other North Korean refugee storybooks because I do like reading about them, but this was just, it was just more appalling what happened to her, more so in China than what happened in North Korea, which is insane to think, but there you go. Oh, this is going to be a long vlog, ain't it? Next up was a huge surprise to me. This was a perfect spooky time kind of slasher book, but it's more like a YA Silence of the Lambs, but without the transphobia. And that is None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney, and I think this book needs to be hyped way more, especially as an audiobook. The audiobook of this is fantastic because we have a couple different POVs in this, but our main character, Emma, is a girl who survived being kidnapped by this evil man who then killed all the other girls when she escaped. And so she's a final girl, basically. And the FBI asks her and another boy who is the son of a man that was murdered by a serial killer, and that serial killer will be around for this, but there is a new serial killer around, and they're believed to just be trying to talk to young serial killers and try to get in their mindset, but they soon find that it's connected to an active case which they're not supposed to be participating on, and it leads them to Simon Gudmundsson. Is that the right name? Is it Gudmundsson? Yes. Simon Gudmundsson, who is a teenage sociopath that has been locked away. He used to be known as the Artist because of how he would position the bodies once he was done with them. And so Emma and Simon develop a very Clarice and Hannibal Lecter relationship, all the while this horrible other serial killer is going around and is doing these very gruesome things to bodies. It's definitely not a light read. What I loved about it is the voice actors for this did such a beautiful job of really keeping you on your toes, because I felt like if I physically read this, I wouldn't have had the same suspense that I did because of the cast that they used for it. So you're like in one of the chapters with Emma, and then suddenly the voice comes on because they like interact with a random stranger, and it's the voice of the serial killer that they're trying to catch, and you just go like, oh my god, he's there, he's there, he's there, he's there. And you have these moments that just like jolt you into the story again, or jolt you out and then back in, and you're like, ah, and it gave you these really good creepy vibes. So I think a lot more people need to be talking about this book. It's especially for spooky times. Like if you need a really good spooky read with some pretty good high stakes that you don't know how certain things are going to go down, it's pretty good. It's pretty freaking good. It's one of the highest rated books I read this month, and I think this is a book that I'll want to listen to every year around the spooky season, because it got me. It got me good. I remember there was a part where the serial killer voice comes on and I was driving and I was like, ah! Next up, I both loved this book and am saddened by this book because it's over. And I love this trilogy so much. But I was very gratified by how this book ended and how these relationships ended. Well, didn't end, but like how they wrapped up. And that is the final in Simon Snow, Any Way the Wind Blows by Rainbow Rowell. It's a chonker, but you read fast with it, and I love this trilogy so much. It picks up right where we left off in Wayward Son, and I love how real the relationships are, especially with Simon and Baz, because, yeah, like, Simon is, you know, he's kind of an oblivious idiot, and that's just his characterization, and Baz is a sensitive moper, but I loved their growth in this, and Simon's realization, even though it starts off with Simon being a complete idiot, but he quickly does a 180 to that, and it's like, wait, I need to fix this. And it's not so much like there is a plot to this story. It's less important, I think, than how the relationships of these characters are changing, especially with Penelope and Shepard and helping him get rid of this curse. But it's also their growth into leading adult lives and trying to find their place in the world around them, in the world of mages, if they want to be in the world of mages anymore. And it's more of a story of their growth than like an adventure plot and high stakes magic stuff that we get in like Carry On and a little bit of Wayward Son. But Wayward Son was also a journey of growth, even if that was much more depressing of a read. But Anyway the Wind Blows is a great wrap up to the whole trilogy, and it's one that I'll probably like go back into quite a lot. But I'm just mad that it's over because I want this to be a book series that never ends, and it's ended now. Maybe we'll get some cute like holiday novellas from Rainbow Rowell, just to keep us all going. I would appreciate that. But yeah, so, and I know for some people like Carry On is difficult to get into because the real big parts of the plot and the big parts of the relationships doesn't happen until like chapter 60s of the books, but it's worth it. It's worth it, especially just to see these characters grow from where they start, from where it starts as a real satire to like Harry Potter things, to being its own thing. And I thoroughly appreciate it. Next book I read on audiobook, and I was disappointed with this book. It was okay. I didn't connect with the characters mostly, but that was You Say It First by Katie Cotugno. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to pronounce the name, and I've heard it a bunch of different ways. One of the characters is a very politically active character who's kind of in this sheltered life, but also has just had a breakup with her boyfriend and later discovers that her ex-boyfriend and best friend are now together. And that's weird because that's just breaking girl code so badly. And then she accidentally calls, after this horrible, horrible day that she's had, she calls a guy who has no motivation to vote or anything. He's kind of a town troublemaker and just has zero drive in life or anything. And they start to form this kind of phone relationship where they're talking to each other and stuff. And it's just a little weird for me, honestly, because she ends up calling him, because she's actually calling his dad, and his dad has actually killed himself. And so she ends up calling him again from her personal number, apologizing to him, and then they just start developing that way. And I'm just like, yo, you would have been fired so fast. It's just a book that I didn't really care. And I thought their relationship when they actually started to be together, it didn't click to me. And I wasn't invested in it. I didn't really like where it went. I thought they were both kind of just assholes to each other. And like, she's really spineless when it comes to telling people how she really feels, because she doesn't actually want to go to, where is she going? One of the fancy schools, Cornell, with her best friend, because now it's weird between her and her best friend because she's dating her ex-boyfriend, even though she says she's fine with it. I wouldn't be fine with it. And it's just awkward, and the way that he is, and kind of just he's just kind of being a dick. And she's much more of a woke person than he is, and there's just this imbalance. So I didn't really like it. I'm sorry. I don't know why I apologize for not liking things, but I didn't like it very much. And we continue the not liking train, and I am devastated that I did not like this book, because I was anticipating this book. And Fee bought this book for me, so I felt bad that she bought this book and I ended up hating it. And I hated it so much. But that is Wildfire by Carrie Mack. And I went into this book expecting, and this, because this is how it was marketed to me, is this best friends with unrequited love for each other, and I knew it was her. I thought he was also, actually he kind of was, but this unrequited love, he's also dating somebody else in the story, and I didn't realize that, but them going on a hike, and they get caught up in a wildfire, and it's their survival story. And while some of that is true, it is more about the girl's grief of losing her grandmother. She also had a mother who was not mentally stable, and she doesn't want to turn out like her. And she'd also has to repeat a year of high school because she failed. And this journey that they're taking to fire camp, where they're going to learn how to fight forest fires, he's doing to try to get her out of this slump and out of this depression that she's in since losing her grandmother. And as soon as there's a thing that happens in this to him, as soon as that happens, I'm like, this is going to go badly. And the thing about it is, this book projected a lot about the unrequited romance that she has for him, despite him also having a girlfriend who's perfectly nice and great. She never confesses. She never does that. And I'm like, what was the point of you having this unrequited love? Because she doesn't get over it really either. So I was left completely unsatisfied by this unrequited romance. And then you learn in a backstory that they did kiss each other, but then they both made it weird afterwards, and that's why they're not together, when they were literally soulmates, basically. It's a thing that their grandmother gives them and stuff, or her grandmother gives them. It's just weird, and it was so short, and yet it took me forever to get through, because it dragged, and I just got mad at it every step of the way. I got so mad at this book, and how it ended, and what happens to some characters. And I don't want to spoil it, but I do, because I don't want you to risk going into a book that made me so angry. But it does not end on a happy note, I can tell you that. And then the whole thing with her not wanting to become her mom, at the end of this book, she literally does that. And I'm just like, she is so selfish. And that didn't change. She remained incredibly selfish for what she does at the end of this book. So where was the lesson learned? There wasn't one. I'm very mad at that book, because I had such high hopes for it. I thought it was going to be one of my new favorite, fall reads, and nope. For a book I didn't hate. I think from here on out, no. Most of the rest of the books in this I did like. But next up I read was Howls Moving Castle. Now, don't come for me. Don't revoke my Japan card. I've never actually seen the animated movie for it. Okay? Okay, just chill. It never happened. Okay? But I'm also told that this is extremely different than the movie. So that's fine. That being said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I love its whimsicalness of this. I was annoyed with Howl most of the time. I thought Sophie was a very interesting character, and of course Calcifer being amazing and awesome. I didn't really guess this plot and how this all works, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know. I don't have anything bad to say. I don't have anything spectacular to say about it, other than that it's whimsical, it's cozy, it just is a read that lifts your spirits, you know? I liked it a lot, and now I will eventually watch the movie at some point in my life, I suppose, but I don't wonder if I'll be disappointed in it because it's not like the book. I don't know, but I think all of us could use a Calcifer in our lives. I'll say that. That was a really short review, but I don't have any other deep thoughts. Usually it's the books that I dislike that I go on for a long time because it made me so angry, and books that I do like, I don't have much to say because it's great. Whimsical. I like whimsical things. That's why I liked House in the Cerulean Sea, because it's whimsical and delightful, and that's what Howl's Moving Castle was. The next book I read was also from my August TBR, and it was the challenge of reading it in a day, and it took forever to find a day to do that, but Lost Boy, The True Story of Captain Hook by Christina Henry. I I'm usually not a huge fan of Peter Pan, because I don't like Peter Pan. That's about it. And I do like Captain Hook, and I really liked seeing this interpretation of Captain Hook's story and Peter Pan's story. I thought it was really well done. It wasn't the best of the best for what I've heard for everything, and I knew once there was a slight romance in it, I knew we were going to have some disaster, because obviously this is a prequel to what we know into Captain Hook himself. And I kind of was hoping one of the characters was going to turn out to be like Smee, but it's not confirmed, but I have a suspicion that that's Hook's Smee. But it was very interesting. Like, you just want to hug James, because he's such a good, like, father figure to these boys, because he's one of the older boys, and Peter is Peter. Selfish little Peter. That's why I don't like Peter Pan very much. I thought this was a very fun interpretation, and pretty dark, actually. It's fairly gruesome for what happens, and some of the other creatures that are in Neverland that I never heard about before are very intriguing as well, and my battery is going to die. So overall, this was great. I did enjoy it, and it's a very fast read. So it's only about a 7.5-hour audiobook, so it was very, very quick to get through. Okay, battery change. Next up, we have Warriors of Wing and Flame by Sarah B. Larson, and I was very happy with this, but I will give fair warning. This came at a time that I needed some feelings of, like, romance that will be turned out to happy ending. I was in that mood of loneliness that I needed something like this. So I will say this duology, because the first book is Sisters of Shadow and Light. It is very much a fantasy romance, heavy on the romance. There is some high stakes adventure and stuff going on with this, but a lot of the characters of our sisters is rooted in the romances that they experience in these books. So if you're not big into a lot of romance aspects, you may not enjoy this book. I did, however, because I really wanted some good, happy romances based on what has happened in the past few books that I had read, where they didn't get those happy endings. So I needed this. And I really, really enjoy this series. I love the world that we're in. I love the dual worlds that we're in, and the ideas of this other race of people with certain abilities. I was a little shocked, though, with one of the relationships that's kind of established, and it does actually fade out, and I wasn't sure if that was intended by the author or if it was like a last-minute switch to have this other character suddenly kind of fall in love with one of the sisters. I did not enjoy one bit of one character that does die in this. I felt like it was almost a cheat way to get rid of the potential for a love triangle, which, like, I'm not a fan of a love triangle, but the fact that they didn't get to have an actual, like, concrete ending to their relationship, I kind of felt a little robbed of that. I was still okay with it. I still really enjoyed the relationship that does develop, because I felt it did develop organically and it made sense for them to fall in love with each other. The other relationship that's established, I just love. It's swoony, it's beautiful, and I love them. But a lot of this story is very heavy on their relationships, and because there is this fun thing, because with the characters that happen to be healers, they experience this kind of thing called sonalis, where when you heal someone, you create kind of a bond with them, and so you're able to, for a while, understand their feelings and emotions and kind of read them that way. But it gets tangled up in feeling like, is this the bond, or do I actually have feelings for this person? And it's a very interesting way to try to navigate one's own emotions if you're not well trained like one of the other characters is, and having to kind of convince the person that you have the love interest with that it's not the bond, this is a real thing. And I thought that was a very interesting kind of twist to it, because some books like to play on that bond being the thing and the only reason to fall in love with one another. Looking at you, Aurora Burning. This one did it so that it's like, we do acknowledge that there is a bond here, but outside of that, here are my reasons for falling in love with you kind of thing. So I appreciate that more realistic approach to the relationships and not just making them like insta-love, which you all know I hate. I really enjoyed this duology. It's very cute. It's one of those where it's like, if I need to feel a little more romance in my life, I will go back to and kind of read those passages that are just swoony romance when you need a little swoony romance in your life. And sometimes I need that, especially when you read a book like Wildfire. Okay? Along with the romance that made me upset, but like, I get it. Fine. I don't care that it was foreshadowed. But we have Night of the Dragon. I finished a couple. Wait, is this? This is another conclusion to a trilogy. That was a conclusion to a duology. And Simon Snow's conclusion to, hold on. How many did I like complete? Rebel was an ending. 1, 2. This was like a month of finishing series, basically, for me. But Night of the Dragon by Julie Kagawa is the third and final book in the Shadow of the Fox trilogy, and I love this trilogy. I am mad at this trilogy, but I also love this trilogy. I thought it was a very great fantasy, Asian-inspired, very Japanese-inspired fantasy world and creatures that you're both familiar with and ones that you're not so familiar with because of someone like me who loves Japanese lore a lot. I'm always worried and concerned when people take Japanese culture and put it into a fantasy world, because sometimes they can do it really badly without doing enough research. But I mean, Julie Kagawa is at least, I don't know if Julie Kagawa is half Japanese, but is at least, because her last name is Kagawa, which is a Japanese last name. Anyway, I'm obviously a white person and I don't get to really have a true say in it, but as someone with lots of experience living in Japan and having degrees in it, I think I have a little bit more than another standard white person. Anyway, enough of that. I love the characters. This is why you read this book, is not necessarily for like the plot of it, because for me there's this point of like, why are we summoning this? Okay. Or like the when it's revealed why the main villain is doing what they're doing, I'm just like, but couldn't you just do this instead? And that would solve the problem. You read this for the cast of characters. It is a found family. There are my two boys, Okame and Dio. And I love them and I would die for them, but I'm pained by what happens to them. But I do love that they're like, so it's like you get glimpses of their romance through the eyes of others because they don't really get their own POVs. But I love the subtle moments where they're like blatant, it's not subtle, they're blatantly flirting with one another in front of other people, and one of them is way more comfortable doing that than the other. And I just love the banter that happens between them and the entire group. Really, everybody has really good banter with each other. I was very upset with some of the deaths that do happen in this to our main crowd, and it was very high stakes with everything that went down. I loved the reveal of Yumiko's past and finally figuring out, you know, where her heritage is and who her parentage is. And I really did love the epilogue. I thought I wouldn't, but I thought the epilogue did a really, really good job in keeping a promise that is made. I loved Hakaimono. Like, Hakaimono is great. Like, at first when you pick up Shadow of the Fox, you think Hakaimono is going to destroy everything in this world. And then what Hakaimono becomes in this book, I'm just like, I would summon you, honey. I mean, you'd probably kill me if I summoned you, but like, as you were at the end of this book, like, yeah, Hakaimono, we appreciate our evil Oni. Read this series, guys. I highly recommend it. I love Julie Kagawa's writing, like, and this is such a growth from like the Iron Fae series, because Iron Fae series does feel very tropey in YA terms. This feels like such a big jump from where Julie Kagawa's writing has been in the past, and now we're getting this, and it's just you can see the growth of the writer. And that's what I kind of love about being on Julie Kagawa's journey. I say that as if I know her personally. I don't. I wish I did. We're getting down to our last 4 books. The next book is going to be a mediocre one for me. I probably won't talk too much about it. But that is We Are Where the Nightmares Go and Other Stories by C. Robert Cargill. And this was okay. It's a collection of kind of short horror stories. Not all of them are as horrific as I would have hoped for the spooky season. The actual story, We Are Where the Nightmares Go, is probably my favorite, along with Hell Creek, because it deals with zombie dinosaurs. There was a very imbalance in how long each story was and kind of the order they were in. The last story especially, I was kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this, but it has a really good eclectic collection of not necessarily all horror or thriller, but spooky stories. It's not all spooky either. Some of them are a little bit more psychological, but it's okay. I didn't hate it. I don't love it entirely, but I can appreciate some of the stories in here. Especially the 2 that I mentioned, so read if you desire. Next up was kind of a disappointment, and I feel really bad about not liking this book, but I think it was marketed poorly for what it is. This is supposed to be another thriller, suspense thriller, that everything happens in literally the last 25 minutes. I listened to it on audiobook, and it dragged on for far too long. But that is The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris. And it jumped POVs on the audiobook, at least that I wasn't following. I don't really like when books do the dates at the beginning, because listening to it, I can't keep track of that. So I got a little confused that way, but that's a personal problem here. What I didn't understand really what it was trying to tell us, because this is a story that basically pits black girls against black girls, and that's the horror, not horror, but the thriller aspect of it, is that they're office friends. There's a new girl to the office because she is in a book publishing world, and she's an assistant to this lady who whatever. She works basically, she's the only black girl in a very white industry, and they hire another black girl who doesn't really have experience or anything, and she starts kind of getting into all of the things that our main character, that Nella, does. Like, she's taking manuscripts from her, she's getting in good with the bosses and stuff. And there is one aspect of this that there's some plot holes in this as to where certain characters and how they were involved in the OBG thing. And there's like this secret society of people, and the twist of how these evil people are using or are kind of there's a brainwashing aspect in this. I didn't buy it. I didn't buy the motivation behind it. I didn't buy how this was helping anyone. I kind of feel like the point was never really made, especially with the ending, because I just didn't feel any payoff to this long-winded story. Like, if this had been a book that was just trying to expose the inequalities of certain industries, especially the book publishing industry, then yes, this is great. It makes a bunch of really great valid points. But in terms of being a suspense thriller, I didn't feel it. I just felt bored a lot of the time, and I really wanted to like this book, but I just didn't, and I feel bad about it because it could have been something bigger, you know? I don't know. I'm sad about that. I really wanted to like it, but it just didn't give me the spooky vibes that I wanted in October. But it has really good points in it. It has really good characters, but it felt like there was for a 13.5-hour audiobook, it felt like there were still so many loose ends. And so it didn't wrap up in a way that satisfied me, especially with so much of the actual, like, climax happening and then the book's over. Like, where's the rest? You know? Anyway, last two books we have. This is the last book on the TBR for October, and then I had one more from September? August? September? Maybe? I forget which month it was supposed to be. But the last book for the October TBR was By the Book by Julia Sonneborn, which is a Persuasion retelling, and this made me like Persuasion a little more. I think that's my issue with Persuasion, because it's not my favorite Austen book, and a lot of people really love Persuasion, is how it's written by Austen. Is it's written with like so many other people's input constantly in your face, whereas Persuasion retellings give you more into the two lead romance characters themselves, that I end up liking retellings of Persuasion more than the original, which is odd, but that's how I feel. And I really did enjoy this. I thought I was going to be kind of like a bland one, but the setting backdrop between this college, between this, you know, the two main characters who were once engaged and no longer engaged, and how he's made himself and how she's turned out, kind of this weird juxtaposition, this reversal of roles, and how despite certain things and there's misinterpretations, and the thwarting character who immediately you're like, what you want about? Okay, sure, honey. Just the imbalance in that relationship, you were already suspicious. I mean, granted, if you go in knowing it's a Persuasion retelling, you already know who the main love interest is, so you're like already knowing something's wrong with this current romantic relationship that she's in. I really enjoyed a lot of the side characters in this as well. I wish there had been a little bit more conclusion for a few of the other side characters, but oh well. Maybe she'll write a spin-off for them. I would like that. But overall, as a Persuasion retelling, I really, really enjoyed this. And I was also happy to see we got a little bit of savoring the relationship at the end. Because some books just like have the final like kiss and that's it. This gave me a little bit more, which is what I appreciate. Could I have used a little bit more? Absolutely. But especially I'd like a little bit more of vindication for Anne against her sister, because she can't do it to her dad because dad dies. But if you know Persuasion, you know. But I would have liked a little vindication for Anne with some of the people that were the original reasons why they broke up. So, and also his mom. Like, I really hoped that there's this scene where there's a +1 and Anne's panicking thinking he's going to invite a girl, and I was really hoping it was his mom who would finally show up, because his mom has a lot of anxiety of being in public because she was a refugee and finally, you know, is an American citizen now, but she's not confident in her English. I would have loved to see her step into being there, but she never does, and that made me sad. But the rest of the book I really, really enjoyed. The last book that I read in October was a surprise. I actually thought I wasn't gonna like this book. I was reading it just to get it off my shelves, basically, which, don't worry, I'm learning. I'm getting better about getting rid of books that I don't want to read anymore. It's happening. Future video coming. But I was pleasantly surprised by this, and that is Sunshield by Emily B. Martin, which I think needs a lot more hype around it. We have the Sunshield Bandit, who is one of our main characters. It goes in 3 different POVs, and her name is Lark, and she breaks up basically slaver wagons and frees people from it. So she's a little bit of a Robin Hood type of character who also just is in the gritty desert world that this is set in. We have Varen, who is not a royal, but he is definitely high class and trying to get this peace treaty kind of thing going on to help stop, you know, slavery and indentured servants in the Makoyan Empire. And he gets involved with a little bit of court drama because there is now suspicion that the Ashoki, who is this kind of grand storyteller and entertainer for the courts, is very well respected roles. The Ashoki, they're appointing a new one, and they had been he and the prince had been exchanging letters that seemed very nice and cordial, and they were ready to gear up and have this treaty. But as soon as they meet, he is now shut off from them. He will not talk to them, and that is because it is believed that Varen and his people have kidnapped the former Ashoki, when that is not the case. And that Ashoki is named Tamsin, and that's one of her POVs. She gets much shorter POVs because obviously she's kidnapped and in pain and emaciated and just really going through shit. But she is basically being held for ransom while a new Ashoki is being appointed. So there's this kind of political drama going on in the background, while also a rescue mission to find Tamsin. And so Varen enlists Lark to help, because he thinks Lark will know how to find her. And of course, she actually is like, oh, damn it, I do know where. But it's very intricately done. It's great world building. And I was really, really into this. Like, far more than I thought I would be. I thought this would be like a solid 3, but I gave it a 4. And honestly, maybe it's leaning more a bit 4.5, but I really want to read the sequel because we are left on some cliffhanger. The sequel, I believe, is called Flood Path, and I'm down for it. I'm ready. Like, somebody buy me this book. I'm on a book buying ban. Anyway, those were the books that I read in October. I did a good stack. I feel proud of myself for that one. I made an effort for October, but as it is NaNoWriMo now, I'm making less effort. But I'm also bare minimum of NaNoWriMo. So, balance. We're trying to have a nice balance in our lives now, okay? So, anyway, what did you guys read in October? Put them down below. If you've read any of these books, let me know your opinions of them. What did you think of them? And if you have any other recommendations, put them down there as well. Or on Facebook, Tumblr, and Twitter. Check out the Ko-fi pages. You've got mine as if you want to support me as a content creator. I thoroughly appreciate any help, especially because I have not been able to work since my surgery recovery. So could use some funds. But also check out Halah's Ko-fi page to pre-order her book Tower of Dogs, coming out January 11th, 2022, and we're all excited for it. I can't believe how soon that actually is. It's coming up. Like, dang. All right. Cool. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time, cuties. Bye. Check it. I delete. Blah, blah, blah.